Hi, welcome to section 2, chapter 8 here. We're working on the American Revolution. We're talking about Thomas Jefferson's explanation of independence all the way through Washington at Bay. Last time we talked about the first major battle of the American Revolution, Bunker Hill, George Washington being appointed to the Continental Army, and then Thomas Paine's common sense, which kind of just consolidated a lot of American ideas about what was going on, and he put into words what we were feeling. Action was needed by the Second Continental Congress after Thomas Paine's Common Sense was published, with 500,000 copies sold. At the Second Continental Congress, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia on June 7th, 1776, proposed that the colonies declare their independence. That topic was a hot topic, and so they kind of tabled it for a little while. They delayed it, and then after weeks and weeks of debate, and also after a very powerful speech by John Adams, who remember wasn't always a patriot to start, the colonies formally declared independence on July 2nd, 1776. John Adams even predicted that July 2nd would be celebrated for decades to come as Independence Day. So what happened? Why do we have the 4th of July as Independence Day? Well, it's kind of like you were born on your birthday, and what if your birth certificate was dated 2 days later? That's kind of what happened because Thomas Jefferson, who was chosen for being the best writer, was the one who drafted the Declaration of Independence, and it was adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. Still, for about 10, 20 years after this, both the dates were celebrated as Independence Day. If you go to the election of 1796 and the election of 1800, in which Thomas Jefferson and John Adams ran against each other for president, the allies of John Adams, or the Federalist Party as they would be known, celebrated the 2nd of July as Independence Day. They had food and drinks and celebrations, kind of sounds like a modern 4th of July, while the Democratic Republicans, the supporters of Jefferson, celebrated the 4th of July because his hand was on that, and he predicted that, and so they did the same thing. Well, in the election of 1800, Jefferson wins after a contested election between him and Aaron Burr, and after that, the Federalists are no longer in power of the presidency. The Democratic Republicans rule for about over 25 years. Because the War of 1812 eventually made the Federalist Party die out, and with the end of the Federalist Party came the end of July 2nd being our Independence Day celebration. Instead, now we celebrate the 4th of July. You know what? Just make a weekend of it. Have a barbecue, blow some stuff up, eat some bacon, throw a baseball around, be true Americans. Um, it was signed by most of them on August 2nd, 1776. Famously, John Hancock, the president of the Continental Congress, he signed it very large, so the king didn't have to get his glasses out to read it. Those 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, all risked their lives. If they were caught, if the revolution failed, the British have a list of all the men who committed high treason. If you have not read the Declaration of Independence, you need to do so. If you're an AP student, you need to be well versed in it. You need to know what it means. And if you're an American, you should probably know what's to it, because it's some of the founding principles of equality and opportunity and the consent of the governed that are in there that are vital to the formation of what is our country and what we believe our country should be. So it's inspired generations of rebels to come. People have referenced it, people have copied it, including Ho Chi Minh when he declared independence from Japan with Vietnam in 1945. Almost copied it verbatim. Here's, you want to take a screenshot, you can read some of the preamble in there and other things. It's very easy to find online. Famous painting of the Declaration of Independence was kind of a sham. They never really were all there at once. The men were going back and forth between their homes because there was fighting going on. It wasn't like this big meeting. But you have the principal people in the middle. You have Jefferson, you have Adams, you even have Ben Franklin, who helped with this committee to draft these grievances. So the war is on. We've declared independence. And our country was really kind of divided into thirds. Estimates kind of range back and forth, but the easy way to remember is there are groups of thirds. A third of Americans were Loyalists, or Tories, as they were called by the Patriots, and the third were the Patriots, who were fighting against the British. The Loyalists, as the estimate says, 1/5 to 1/3 of the population. These were people that were loyal to the British Crown. They were strongest in the South, except Virginia. They're also very strong in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, where the Quakers were there. Quakers were pacifists and didn't want to partake in the war because everyone had an inner light of God and everyone is special. So, including this is always a little fun side note in history. Benjamin Franklin's son, his illegitimate son from a prostitute, oops, was actually a loyalist governor for New Jersey, which makes for some very awkward dinner parties. Hey son, how's it going? Whatever, dad, quit rebelling against me. Usually it's the other way around. The kids rebelling against the dad. The Loyalists were also strongest in places where the Anglican Church or the Church of England was in power. And the Patriots were numerous where the Presbyterian and Congregational churches flourished, which is mainly New England. So you have a third Loyalist, a third Patriots, and a third that just worked. Raised kids, didn't do much. So that's about a third of the population there as well. You have a political cartoon kind of showing this unity between the Loyalists and the Patriots going on. And, New England Patriots, that heritage is there with the football team, which, we all know the Denver Broncos are superior. Get him, Champ Bailey. Get him. So before the Declaration of Independence, Loyalists were not extensively persecuted. Yes, they were ridiculed. Yes, they were harassed. And in some places, there were some incidents of violence, especially in New England. But there's not widespread killing. There's not off with their heads in guillotines like in France and the Revolutionary France, or just thousands and millions of people disappearing like in communist Russia or the Soviet Union, going to Siberia. After the Declaration of Independence, things change though. There's more ridicule, there's some hangings, some imprisonment, but there's no widespread reign of terror like other revolutions. Many loyalists actually fled to British lines or simply fled to Canada. In fact, a lot of those people that lived in Canada just a generation later, when the War of 1812 happens and the United States tries to invade Canada, it's really almost a civil war. It's those loyalists who left to exodus their kids to Canada versus the Patriots' kids. It's a family feud. Estimates range from smaller numbers to up to maybe 80,000 loyalists left the country during the war. Several hundred thousand may have stayed though. Just laid low, kept quiet, or moved to the frontier where they could be left alone. There were an additional 50,000 that fought for the British because they didn't want to leave the British Empire. It's so strong, it's powerful. Why fight them? This is a great country. And so many, many, many people fought for the British. This is a picture in New York City. They tore down the statue of King George III, and then they melted it down and used it as bullets to fight King George III's troops. Take that. So, General Washington. Washington, after his victory at Boston at Dorchester Heights, correctly predicted the British, even though they left for Halifax, Nova Scotia, were coming back. He correctly predicted that the next site, the next battle, their invasion, was going to be New York City. And so he was there, and he was building defense networks, forts, breastworks, you name it. In July 1776, late in the month, 500 ships carrying 35,000 men came ashore in New York City. They wanted the defendable harbor, and the goal was actually to move up the Hudson River and cut New England off from America. The British really believed if they could just squash New England, the rest of America would fall into line. Because Manhattan Island is surrounded on the west side, looking at the Hudson River, and on the east side, you have the East River. They could use their boats to sail up both sides and fire cannons into Manhattan. Washington had 23,000 men, and he had 5 months to prepare for this. He predicted correctly the spot the British were going to land. He was right, and they built forts, and they got everything going, and they had 5 months to get it all going. And he forgot to secure the backdoor entrance to their line of defense, which was Jamaica Pass, which is down modern-day Brooklyn. Kind of like how the British, snuck up behind Quebec into the Plains of Abraham during the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War. Washington makes it just a costly error. Failing to secure Jamaica Pass allowed the British to swing in and outflank the Americans and really crush them at the Battle of Long Island and the ensuing Battle of Brooklyn. And it kind of showed that Washington maybe wasn't up to snuff in terms of military tactics and preparation, Where he's really great is just holding things together, and he's really good at escaping. Um, because he made a daring night escape across the East River to Manhattan Island under the cover of darkness. It was it's just an instrumental, well organized, well planned escape, and the army lived to fight another day. They escaped narrowly. They kind of fought their way up through Manhattan Island. They did cross the Harlem River. They fought at the Battle of Castle Heights. They would, engage in battle just briefly and skirmish, and then they would run away because they knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, and so they had to keep the army alive to keep the country alive. They could not allow themselves to be captured. Washington fled to New Jersey. He was being pursued by General Howe's men, and he kept falling back, waiting for winter, waiting for a place to make a stand, because in this time, once winter hit, both armies took a break. The campaign season was over, and so that was ultimately his goal. By the end of 1776, he crossed the Delaware into Pennsylvania. So after declaring independence, he read the Declaration to his troops. They cheered. They went on a massive losing streak, losing and getting embarrassed in New York, at Long Island, and Brooklyn. They lost all of New Jersey. And this is the low point of the American Revolution. This is when all hope seems lost. Men are leaving. They're going home for the winter. They're going to go back to their farms. They believe it's a lost cause. And the British prepared for their winter quarters. Here's a map that kind of shows what's going on in Manhattan. So you can see Manhattan Island here. I can't really point to us. Manhattan Island is here. I don't know if the mouse is there, but you can see that the boats are there. They're stationed in Staten Island. And then Jamaica Pass is where they sneak around, outflank the Americans at the Battle of Long Island and the Battle of Brooklyn, and they have to escape across the East River. So lastly, Washington, because this is a low point, had to do something to kind of lift the spirits of America. And so the Battle of Trenton was that opportunity. These were some victories in New Jersey. Famously, as you can see in the painting here, and you've been taught this as young kids, you've heard this, maybe incorrectly, but Washington and his men famously crossed the Delaware on Christmas night, not Christmas Eve, Christmas night, 1776. Historians have debated whether or not the Delaware would be full of ice like this. It used to be, in modern times, it doesn't ice over. It's very rare, especially in December. Legend has it that Washington can chuck a rock across the whole thing, which if you've ever been to the Delaware River, it's huge. But they actually found out that there was, a little bit of little ice age going on, and it is accurate. What is inaccurate, though, and there is both sides to the story, is legend holds that Washington attacked a bunch of drunk, hungover Germans who were up too late partying, celebrating Christmas, and so it wasn't really a fair fight. He only had 2,400 troops. He surprised the Hessians at Trenton. And like I said, they debate, historians back and forth. There's different sources on, were the Germans drunk? Were they hungover? The German commanders, the historians have looked into it. Ron Chernow, who did the famous Washington biography, looked at German accounts of it, and they said they had a hunch that something was up, and they were on guard. In fact, they didn't celebrate Christmas like they normally would, and they were not hungover. They were not drunk. They were prepared. They were just overwhelmed by Washington's forces. Now, that being said, if you're the commander of the Germans, you might get in a little trouble if your troops were all drunk, so maybe you're going to say they're sober and you got overwhelmed. They killed 30 and captured 918 troops. And so this is the debate. Were they sleeping off a celebration? Were they prepared? The truth might be in a little bit in the middle. Maybe, I think one of the commanders was literally caught with his pants down in this battle. But maybe some were drunk, some were not. But overall, it lifts the spirits of America. It gives the cause a little bit of hope. In the darkest time, there's just a glimmer, a ray of sunshine that, hey, we won a battle. We finished, the campaign season with a victory. What people forget, though, is Washington went back across the Delaware and then crossed it again, days later, once again, in snow and ice, and then attacked Princeton as well. And it's at this point that Washington kind of realizes he has to adopt a war of post style of fighting. A lot of the textbooks don't have this, but the war of post it's kind of a fancy way to say guerrilla warfare. But he can't really engage the British in an all-out battle. They're outgunned, they're outnumbered, they don't know the tactics, and so they have to kind of get in these skirmishes, attack, inflict casualties, try to capture a bunch, but then back off, or flank, or run away. And so that's kind of his strategy the rest of the war, is to not directly engage the British unless they had most of the advantages on the battle. Maybe if they have the high ground, maybe yes, we'll engage the British, but they're gonna keep them at a distance. It's kind of like a boxer using his jab, just jab, 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 just stay away because they know if you get in too tight, this heavyweight's gonna knock you out with some of their power punches. And that's what Washington does. He just jabs the British, kind of maintains his time, buys his time, keeps the army together, looking for an opportunity to throw in a power punch, but not getting too close because that would really, really knock the Americans out. Here's another, little brighter version of Washington out front with the crossing of the Delaware. Very famous moment in American history. Another little engraving of it, and it was amazing because it was a very dangerous crossing with the ice and in the cover of darkness, and it was almost blown. At one point the troops almost ruined the surprise by attacking too soon, and Washington was furious. And during these battles, when he proved his heroism again, he was out front, commanding. His bullets are whizzing by. The guy had no fear. So you can see here from the map, we have Bunker Hill, we have Boston Siege, then you have the Battle of Long Island, and you have the retreat of Washington all the way into Pennsylvania, and then he, very at the end, attacked Trenton and Princeton, and then they settled for winter, kind of in that New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. Next time, we're going to talk about Saratoga, the turning point of the war, and how America gains allies. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this.